Yeah. So I realized that somebody extended my slot, and I thought, well, no, it's not important. And so I thought, well, I couldn't resist, and I had to put in a slide that s- exactly. So those are truths at the bottom, and you can see a person who believes in truths being burned by certain things. That's basically the essence of this. If you actually understand what's written, then it's completely lost on you, because otherwise. Right. So what does CPU bandwidth mean on modern systems, and do we care? Um, I'm working in the power team, and apart from power, we also care about energy efficiency. But this is mostly to do with the power budget, as imposed power constraints imposed by thermal environmental issues. So I had this little experiment, um, trying to work on one layer of a let's say complementary approach to thermal throttling. So you can you can try to comply with your power budget at different levels. So your application can try to be clever and maybe render less if it notices that the power is scarce or the budget is small. The middleware can do its best knowing what all the applications, what the situation is. Is the camera on? Are we maybe in a situation where somebody is playing a game? The kernel doesn't know much about the use case. That would be, I guess, a tunable thing. The firmware is where we are indiscriminately penalizing every task. So just before the hardware fuses burn through, it says, well, now I have to impose some limit in a way or another. So going from top to bottom, you can do fancier things. Going from bottom to top, you usually do, let's say, more brute force things that are supposed to be more reliable, on the other hand. And so what I was working on is where the error is, basically in the middleware. So I'm trying to throttle, but I'm not trying to throttle indiscriminately. I'm trying to throttle tasks that I believe, or I'm told, can be throttled without impacting the user experience too much. In order to do that, I'm using the bandwidth controller. There's a C group for the throttleable tasks that either the tasks themselves ask to be put into, or there's also an ongoing investigation to classify the tasks without them telling us. IPA tells us the power budget via U events. The Power Manager service has a thread running and calculates from that with a control loop the budget, the bandwidth budget that we want to give the throttleable tasks. And with that, we managed to stay within the power budget and still not impact the user experience too much. Yeah, I can talk about that later a bit if anybody's interested, because I noticed that throttling and power budgets are an interesting thing to more than just one person around, I guess. There are two issues that I would like to talk about further. One is that so the bandwidth that is provided is not necessarily, well, is not proportional to computation, nor is it proportional to power consumed. It is just a time slice ratio, and that might differ with the architecture. If we are on big little, or if the execution units are slightly different pipeline depth, and also with the OPP, or even effects when we are doing SMT, so we're sharing resources. That is also affected by how much computation we actually do per that within that time slice. Also, the power is not a linear function of the bandwidth. What you can see there is the tasks being throttled, and the throughput is reduced. And at this point, at some point, the task is so small that is hopefully going to be migrated onto a smaller core on a big little system. And all of a sudden, there's going to be a big drop. Yeah. our control loop is supposed to cope with that very well. At least I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary. But this might be an issue on, let's say, server systems, if we want to do cores, etc. Yes, exactly. So it's the ratio of the time slice that you have been allocated to the entire time slice. Right, and the other issue that I ran into looks more like a bug. So this is on a Hikey 960 board with a more or less vanilla 4.14 Android kernel, and these are 4 tasks that have the same. They post the same load, so they all try to they're 4 RT-up tasks. They all try to do 90% of a big core of what RT-up does, this floating point computation. So it's compute bound. And what I'm showing here is the utilization estimate for these tasks. So this is the 10% task, which runs the longest. The 50% task runs until roughly here. The 90% task finishes faster, and the 100% task the same. So in theory, the 100% and 90% task should behave pretty much the same, because the 100% task is unthrottled, and the 90% task gets exactly what it asks for. So it's a 90% big core task, and it's throttled at 90% of the time slice, so it should just do exactly what it's.
Talking about putting a 90% task into 50% sequence.
Exactly.
Okay. Right.
Yes. Yeah. So looking at what's going on in terms of scheduling, runtime, etc., that all looks good. So the 50% task, I haven't got a slide with the stats, but they are pretty much spot on. So it gets exactly the time slices of the length that you would expect. Same for all the others. What doesn't seem to work is the utilization estimate. So you can see here that the 10% task jumps about. Normally you would expect it somewhere around here, actually. 10% of the big tasks. Yeah. Cool.
How the throttling mechanism is working.
Yes.
When you're throttling a cgroup, we consider that it's frozen.
Yes. Exactly.
So it's not idle, it's frozen. So nothing happened, and it restarts just like it was. Yeah. So I would say that the utilization in that sense is correct, because
utilization isn't okay. Yes.
Utilization is correct because it has been frozen. So you haven't seen this frozen. This throttling time frame doesn't exist from a cgroup point of view.
Yes.
So you can't see this 10% utilization because you haven't seen that 90% of the time it was throttled.
Yes.
But then if you use the information to see if you can pack more things on your CPU.
Sorry?
But then if you want to use that information to decide if you want to, I don't know, pack or spread your thing on the same CPU, then it doesn't work anymore, because I mean that thing is only running 10% of the time.
Both statements are correct. It's trying, but it's a different optimization goal.
Yeah.
One is trying to optimize for when the task is unthrottled on the CPU. This is representative of, in that instant, it may be 100% utilized in the time it's unthrottled. The other is like when it's not throttled, you want, in this case, to be representing that, but they are different goals.
They're not quite. So look at the 10% task, for example. If that were true, as you just said, then you would expect it to be 90% roughly, wouldn't you? You wouldn't expect it to go down as low as this. This is actually due to the fact that it's in fact posing a smaller load, and the OPP, the thing picking a small OPP. So if it would show what the task.
So with the latest kernel, you should not have this decrease because now the load is normal cap.
Okay, good, yeah.
And maybe there is another thing that we can raise is that when we are with the C groups boundaries, I agree that we are not scaling the runtime with the frequency tube. I mean, when we say we give him only 10%, it's 10% of the time, maybe it should be 10% of CPU capacity.
Right. Yeah, it's
Which means
just
that maybe we should scale the time
Is,
used to throttle.
Yes, that's one of the previous points. Yes.
it's the same we are doing with that.
Yeah, but we get the same problem
Yeah.
with the deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, with regards to the throttling and what you should see, I don't know. I'm currently of the opinion that what you actually want is the like the 10%. You want to see it as a 10% task, because what you want to happen is that the throttled task is migrated onto a smaller core, which wouldn't happen if the utilized estimate is so high.
It's like 100 milliseconds out of every one. So for that 100 milliseconds, it's 100% busy. We don't want the load balancer to see that as a 10% task.
Yeah, can I point out that
The
what
time
he's,
scale
what
as
he's
well.
looking at is actually utilization.
I know, I noticed that too, but I just...
Yeah, and then I want to
Yeah.
raise this other question, is there any need really to have utilization propagated across run queues? Because we are not updating that signal right now. I think because it's mainly expensive, we should work on the C group things to propagate that signal. If you want to update it, like decay it, when you unthrottle the task, let's say you unthrottle the task group, and you want to properly decay to represent at 10% the utilization, so it's not lower. Then you have to work the hierarchy and do all the updates, and that's overhead.
No, we
The
don't do
question
that.
is,
Yeah, we don't do that, right? We freeze time.
right, exactly. So the question is, why do we keep propagating utilization across run queues that there are not really usages, and why we don't keep utilization only only for tasks?
It's a
and
time scale difference, because you could be like, you could have picked there's an intrinsic problem here where you could have picked a period for which this is a problem, and you could have picked a period for which this is not a problem.
That's another problem in my view. But the problem that I'm seeing is that we are updating signals
If they
that
go
are
around
broken,
for
that we don't really need them. And
That's
this
like
problem,
3 sked periods, right? So we need to treat them as if they're a real thing.
what I'm saying is that if you keep this signal only on the task level and the run queue aggregated, as we do, well, not as we do, but let's say only run queue level utilization, which is always updated because we never throttle the run queue, and the task utilization signal. Whenever we unthrottle the run queue and we will pick one of those tasks, the task will be decayed, and we see everything which is working exactly as we expect. There are no inconsistencies around. The task will have the right utilization, the run queue will have the right utilization, and we don't have a broken utilization which is not usable.
You
But
could
in
maybe
this
do
case,
that.
you need two different, right now you are doing one metric for utilization and load.
Well, you can still keep the same, but we don't really need to update it for task group run queues because
It would still be consistent. Load is more of a thing. Load being higher than utilization is always going to be more of a quick runtime. And we just have that discrepancy increase.
yeah. But load is different, you use it for load balancing, that's fine. In our case, what we want to try to do is just to have a really good view of utilization. When the system is not overutilized, we want to do task placement. We want to see that the CPU is used at a certain amount and task at a certain utilization. Right. So we need task utilization and root run queue utilization to be in sync and updated when we need them. All the other stuff is not really needed, and we just work and update that load and utilization without really needing to update utilization.
Yeah, what is that we are trying to change the behavior of the CFS boundaries. Because how it's done is that the tasks don't, the goal is that the tasks doesn't know that it's in total. You not change the behavior, just that you provide them.
But the task knows that
Now he's just calling out that we could add
10%.
decays when we wake back up. The decays still wouldn't take effect unless we iterated unless we did a very expensive walk.
Yeah.
The decay still wouldn't take effect until the task schedule. So you'd still get the same effect.
You wouldn't have to decay though.
Yeah.
The two workarounds.
And we don't want to do it, I agree, but I'm just saying that probably we don't even need to do it.
No, if you would, to have it actually not have this effect is to pretend you have 1,000 tasks in your throttle power. Until you schedule all 1,000 of those tasks, we won't process the decay, and you'll get exactly the same.
Because the run queue will be updated anyway, it's
But not
already
the task
updated.
one.
The task, whenever we pick a task, we decay the task,
Yeah.
and we see what's the new utilization of that task, and it will be in sync.
No, but when we unthrottle the tree,
Yeah?
all of those utilities are introduced.
We don't care about that treatment because we don't use the
We do.
utilization of a task group.
But we
don't use it
this
to do it.
is where it becomes a problem if you didn't do that.
Why?
Because you might introduce it, like, pretend you unthrottle 1,000 tasks.
Yeah.
That run queue should look 100% busy again.
You you don't use the utilization of that run queue. That's what I'm saying. As far as I know, the utilization of a task group is not used anywhere in the scheduler. Not in the load balancer, of course, and not in the workup part.
It's consolidated utilization of all the tasks.
Yeah,
And then that's what we are propagating.
but we don't need it.
But you end up on the root
Now,
pool
when
anyway.
someone is saying that it's used when you propagate up to that root run queue.
It's propagated, but it's quite straightforward. We are just adding and removing directly. There is no complex scaling as for the load the load average. But when you are at a level, you are using the utilization of the scale entity of the C group. That's what you are using. And this one is the sum of
I
the
think it's
scale
right.
entity of the upper level and so on and so on.
I understand that the math
But we
goes that
follow
way,
through.
and for load makes sense because we use the
That's
task group
also
code.
what happens for the utilization.
In
So
theory,
you
for
look at utilization of group, what
Yeah.
Quentin is saying is when you look at utilization is, you look at the task UTL or the CPU UTL, nothing in between.
But when we follow the group, we might take out a hierarchy and put your task controls. Unless you have the group entity, we can't take that out.
No, you keep the group entity, you keep all those data structures. We just don't need to update it, and we don't need to
Because that'll
expose
have
it.
the same effect.
Yeah, right. So, yeah.
But
Yeah,
we
it
don't
won't-
care.
it'll give you the same effect.
And the point is that
It won't fix it.
the point is that
Okay, but at least it's not exposed like a signal which looks like a mirror.
No, it'll still be a signal like this. Because you'll have a bunch of junk ones that haven't been updated to resource.
So I had two workarounds in mind. Assuming that, so there's, I was wondering, so you were worried about when you unthrottle tasks that it might not jump up quickly enough. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding that?
I'm saying, when you unthrottle a hierarchy,
Yes.
you have a chunk of task utilizations and group utilizations in that hierarchy that you need to be in sync. So either one way to keep them in sync is to freeze time. Another way to keep them in sync is to update everything when you unthrottle.
Something different. So would you be worried that they would start at a 10% utilization, even though they could now run at 90%, until that has been ramped up?
Sorry?
Do you have differently? So it would, if they would show as 10% tasks, because they're throttled at 10% at the moment.
Over what period?
Let's say,
The period completely matters.
no, okay, so the value that util_est returns for this task, assume that would be,
If you have the book util_est, it doesn't really play a role in all those stuff.
But
It's just util average that it does.
no, this is util_est.
I understand, but
It's
the
just
effect
the
is,
util average.
yeah, it's
You
the
get
same, you
util
can
average.
provide
But
util
for the
average.
placement, I'm interested in util_est. Anyway, so are you worried about ramping up having too slowly? Or would you be happy with it then being perceived as a 10% task and then
I'm saying you can't ignore the period. It completely matters, like the time period that being throttled over completely defines that.
Yeah, it can be indicate more or less, right? Depending on the
Sorry?
period. I mean, depending on the period that you
Right.
are eventually not
Right,
running.
if your period's below what we're doing the util over, then yes, it should be
Yeah.
reflected. If your period is 1 second,
Yeah.
then
Then you're
you
not.
can't have it reflected in utilised because that'll be just wrong. It would be wrong to say it's a 10% task if you run for 100 milliseconds straight before you throttle.
but that's the intention of the throttling, is to say, well,
But I'm saying it's not. I'm saying the throttle here, but it's not. You can't take the period as invariant.
So can add in, so we have utilised, which is basically it's a kind of a filter on top of the util average. Can it be useful or meaningful to have another thing that reflects this?
So you
this
util_est
problem?
never.
No, I mean I'm not saying that we should utilize having write another filter built on top of util average, which reflect the effect that the bandwidth controller can have on a task, and use that for this kind of decisions.
so I have two things in mind. One is basically limiting the value to the maximum of the actual perceived utilization and the bandwidth that's been allocated to this, and the other thing being basically since when it's preempted, when it's frozen. At this time, we know how long the time slice is. And we could
Yeah,
just
so what I'm saying is
pretend-
that instead of changing how util average works for tasks that are throttled, create a new filter, I mean new util something, util bandwidth, util something that actually does what it seems to be needed by you. don't know if it makes any sense.
Yes, or you have util_s to return the bandwidth.
No, but because we're saying that we don't want to change our well, utilis it's even another thing because it's so it might be utilis or maybe
that can be a solution which is adding something while I still don't get why we cannot remove something, which is the utilization of task groups, which is not used anywhere. Because apart from the mathematical property that I agree is there, but the rank queue utilization is correct. If you call the rank queue utilization would be 10% when you throttle a task group.
But that's what I'm saying, that won't be right.
Wait, is it true that the rank queue utilization will be 10 if you throttle the task? If you
Depending on
throttle
the
the
period.
task?
No, it all depends on the period.
Okay, in that specific configuration, I agree. Let's say that the period is aligned with the shape,
So
the
you
bed
pick like a
half-life.
32
So we are in
millisecond.
the range of 10, right? So 32 milliseconds will go up there. So the utilization will be 10. And we will oscillate that around the 10 with the properties of 10, right? So it's not like a period of 1 second. It's 32 milliseconds roughly period of the task. Utilization will be 10, the utilization of the road rank queue. But when we attach the task, we unthrottle the task, we have this weird utilization that doesn't really represent anything because we have discarded all the idle time and that signal is not used anywhere. So we spend time to
I
update.
have to look at the propagation. Like, I'm not disagreeing or agreeing. I'm saying I have to look at the propagation. My concern is you would get out of sync task entities in the tree, and then whenever you move those task entities, everything's just none of the math works out.
Or move the entities because of load balancing. No, the load will be updated. I'm not saying that we don't need to update the load or do something different in the load. We can keep doing whatever.
No, but I'm just saying, like, if you apply, like, if you're going to have n tasks in that tree, which is supposed to, like, this is not the case that he's talking about necessarily. This is the case where you have like a deeper hierarchy.
Right. Yeah. So all those tasks in the unthrottled task group, whenever they wake up, they get their
No, but
utilization.
they may be awake already. Then they never went to sleep. When you
Okay, so they
unthrottle
are-
them, when you unthrottle the tree, all of them suddenly appear
Yeah, but
back
you-
in the
but-
rank queue. And that's what I'm saying is problematic.
Okay, so we should really fix them and work.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's too expensive. I'm saying walking the entire tree to find them was really expensive. That's like the root of what I'm saying.
You don't enqueue each task that has been throttled. You just enqueue the entire tree, and everything that's in it is automatically enqueued. You don't touch them.
And that's why I'm saying like you can't like magically change these values and these values at the same time.
No.
But when we visit the tree and we
don't.
we
We
pick
don't.
one,
We
We
just,
don't.
the whole point of this is for scalability, the whole point is we don't do that.
True, I agree,
We
but-
attach the entire tree, this is why we introduced H on our running at the same time. So that we could just push the entire tree back into the structure with no subtree operations.
True, okay, but at
So we
some
can't
point you
get to
attach
the
the
task.
tree, you don't update utilization, and then you go and at real time as lifetime you pick another task from that one.
Maybe.
At that, yeah, well, you do, because
No,
it's
but I'm
another
just
task.
saying like you might be picking, you're not necessarily picking from that subtree. Like,
Yeah, exactly, but at a certain point you pick a task from that
Yes.
subtree, and the first thing that we do is update task for that task, and decay the utilization. So the really first time you use a task from that subtree, you update the utilization. So you never use a broken utilization in the shader.
I'm just saying you have to be really careful. I'm not saying like,
Well, maybe it must be better, but that's my impression, that we never use those broken values when we keep tasking, we allocate them on a CPU.
Well, that move where you queue the whole tree, right? You attach the whole tree like that,
Then
the CPU level of the bomb. If you don't attach the
and like the load balancer, like if the load balancer starts looking at task util,
Yeah.
it's going to see a totally bogus value if we haven't scheduled that task.
Yeah, it's going to be broken until they've touched all the tasks, which can take a long time. It's not even guaranteed to happen within the first
Right, you
time.
might get throttled.
You can throttle it again before it actually gets touched. So it's unbounded the error you can have almost.
But the point that you're looking at the utilis, it will be correct if you would limit utilis with bandwidth, wouldn't you? Because bandwidth has been updated once that's
Well, so you can like what you're actually asking for here is like here's the catch-22. Like you could add an RQ util which is just the time that that run queue was running and that would reflect like throttling and everything else. The problem is that measure will be totally bogus as soon as you pull the task. Right? And that's why we have the pelt estimates to try and fix that problem.
But maybe it's not because the throttling is really about I want to limit the available resource to a group of tasks without they are aware of that. That's not what you want to do.
That's fine. We don't care what the tasks think. We want to be able to restrict the tasks so the rest of the system can make different decisions.
Yeah.
It's really different that it's a power thing. Give us the goes for
So I'm not
we
sure
know
that
those
we
tasks are
should
going to count down,
use
so let's
this,
throttle them so other tasks can use the power. So. And in this case, definitely don't want, if you throttle a group of tasks that don't count down 5%, we don't want to go and raise prices like crazy so they think too.
It's not, you don't want to throttle it.
I mean, I think
You want to minimize the amount of time they are scheduling. What you want really is the amount of time they are scheduling. You don't want to throttle. So you're trying to use the throttle fixture to minimize their running time, which is different. I mean, that's why you have some problem, because the throttle is that the task should not even know that they've been throttled.
so you could fix this with some more tracking, right? You could, like what we do right now is we have, we freeze time for the tree when we throttle. You could, if you wanted, add tracking to the tree, which was the amount of time that's passed during a throttle state. And you could have entity tracking, which was a snapshot of the last tree track throttle state. And you could combine them to do something like what the pattern is. But it's extra tracking and extra work.
Yeah, I don't know, because it's just that in one case we don't want to track this throttling time, whereas what you want is track this throttling.
Well, it's also a question of what that, I think there's a question of load versus util, right? The freezing is optimized for load, not util. And we could add some bits to the math to make it track util better while still optimizing for load.
You will have a problem because you will use the same time slot. You use the same.
No, I'm saying that's why you have to, I'm saying you have to introduce a separate, you'd have to have per entity, you'd have to have a per entity snapshot of the tree they belong to the top time. And then you'd need, on the tree, you'd need a time pass. And that would allow you to have a correct util, and when you grab an entity from the tree, correct the util from that entity. And that would let you get this without corrupting the load.
It's not just take into account this idle time. I mean, right now it's just that they don't want the throttle.
No, this is the correct idle into util. So I'm just saying, it's finicky, you have to do that.
So it's like passing 2 times the activity to be updated.
I think it works.
It's one for you.
I think it works, but you have to be careful. Like the thing that sucks is it's an extra field of accounting on the entities, because you do need that to be current, and it's an extra.
We've already run out of the cache line.
Do you need?
Well, you would only use any throttle entities. So
Do you need this?
we wouldn't put it anywhere
C
in the
group.
class pattern.
All the tasks in the C group appears like appears like one task.
You just have
Pretty
all the
much
C group for
equal.
0.
In the share mechanism of your C group, if you already need that, you don't care about that. I would even say that it's a bad effect for you.
It's a bandwidth controller. It's not about trying to balance groups. It's just go back.
Yeah.
The structure might look different though in the future with C groups.
You don't care about this group load mechanism that is part of this.
No. Not at all.
So that's why. So I think that because we need to maintain the right load because of this group load mechanism.
That's fine.
You don't, but on your side you don't need that, but you need some. You need to take into account the idle time.
I'm
We
pretty
need
sure what I outlined
utilization
is
to
actually
be.
correct.
Sorry.
I'm pretty sure what I outlined is actually correct.
Yes, I think so too. So you basically have 2 different timelines, one for utilization and another for load.
Yeah, this thing you have to. Because right now the same timeline is used for all the metrics.
Yeah, so you need to pass in 2 different timestamps.
Yeah, we have to double the number of load
Not,
Pellet
No, it's not that bad.
not
It's not that bad.
entirely double it.
It's you'd add a field on the CFS up here, which is basically
The unfold.
the like last unfold timestamp or something similar, and you'd have that. If that be 0, then you would ignore it completely.
Yeah.
And then for util, you would pull that up to the current time and use that delta rather than the time delta. Because we already track time on the CFS up used to handle throttling in the first place. You just use a different data point for that. And on the entities, you need to track the last one, the entity source, so you can track the delta as well. I think it was.
You had a new parameter in the.
It shouldn't be a new parameter. You should be able to do it transparently in the existing data. It's just more fields. I think. Someone should have to look, would have to type the bits to make sure it's correct.
So if you would just clamp it with a bandwidth, that would be too incorrect.
That would be true. This would be correct for the chat. This would be correct with respect to the interaction period.
Yes.
And then that would fix the signal going into utilized.
Yeah, I don't know, any other stuff maybe regarding the throttling or something? Because I think that there are some approaches to that as well. Or
I'm not sure that the right feature for you to use, because that's not what it's been designed for.
What is it then designed for? I mean, it's designed for limiting the bandwidth you give the task, and that's
But
exactly
maybe
I
I think
think-
another secret
but I think-
dedicated to that.
I think there's one thing missing, which makes it much better for him, which is, and I think it's something it needs that we've never added, is a refill rate.
sorry, what's up?
A refill rate.
Ah, yeah.
Right now, we refill the entire quota period at the period edge,
Yeah.
and that's why so much of this stuff, the period matters so much.
Yeah.
If you have a refill rate that you can say the rate at which you're refilling it over that period, it actually gives you a lot more. Because you can do a lot more things with respect to same busting, because you could set, for example, today, if you want a high bus budget, the only way to do that is to set a high quota and high period, which gives you a long time if you exceed the bus.
Yeah.
But a refill rate would actually let you capture that parameter as well, because the refill rate would actually just fill up to your max quota, and if you ran out of that, you wouldn't wait for until that quota period, you'd still take in at the refill rate. And you can smoothen it out where you can say, like, I want this to be like over a 10 millisecond period or 100 millisecond period or some same thing. So I think for what he's doing, the key thing is to get a refill rate.
So that's more of a token bucket.
Yeah, basically.
It would be something similar like to conceptually like having item injection but per group of tasks.
You could use it to do that
Yeah.
once you had a refill rate. I mean, you could use it without a refill rate, it's just hard to do it the same. A refill rate would let you do it much more sane, because then you can have like busts and outputs. It's something it needs, it's never has never been added.
Still have time?
Yeah.
If you're done.
What do you want me to do?
Okay, if you're done. Thank you.
Good.